You are listening to the Source Connection Podcast, an ongoing invitation to remember your true infinite nature and embody your unique human expression. By holding space for the kind of conversations that uplift, inform, and unite us, we are here to amplify the field of possibilities and explore the keys to creating the new. Hosted by Liz B. and Tarah Long. For more, check out thesourceconnection.us, Spotify, Odyssey, and YouTube.
Hey, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here today with myself, Tarah, and our very special guest, Jennie Morton. So let's take a moment to come into coherence together. Let's just start tuning into ourselves, our breath, our heart beating. So today I will invite you to find your heartbeat wherever it is that is easy for you. It works for me to put 2 fingers in my throat area where I can feel it very intensely. Some people can find it on their wrists or the different parts of the body, or you can just close your eyes and integrate and feel into that. And I just want you to tap into that rhythm, dip in the breath, and let's share the yumminess of silence together. Inviting wonder and curiosity, openness and understanding. Tuning into our own inner guidance and knowing that we have within everything that we will ever need. And knowing that this is a healing broadcast that activates in you your remembering. Let's take a deep inhale together through the nose and let's sigh it out. Couple more times, inhaling deeply. Taking in the inspiration through the breath, bathing all of you and letting go. So funny because I said, let's share some silence together. And there's construction outside, and I just hear tang, tong, tang, tong, tang, and banging and dropping.
I couldn't hear it. So,
Goodness.
Yeah. So it was silent for us. Thank you.
So I love the contrast and how much it just keeps asking us to remember. So we're here today with a very special person. I met Jennie maybe last year. I don't even know. It feels again like that concept of time. It's not really relevant. And through our common friend, Yerasimos. Hi, bro. And since then, we've been having this very inspiring, beautiful, multi-dimensional conversations. And so last time we saw each other, I said, I'd love for you to come and be a guest at the Source Connection, because this needs to be heard by other people. And being a multi-dimensional being, I'm just going to introduce Jennie and touch a few of the things, which is way more than that, but a doctor, an osteopathic doctor, and we can go into a little bit of what that is, right? Integrative medicine woman, a performer, dancer, singer, musician, heart math practitioner, author, mystic to me. So I'll leave it at that and we'll take it from there. Thank you so much for being here today. I adore you and I'm so happy we're together.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me and to, exposing me to your wonderful platform as well. And I've been indulging in all the beautiful videos that you have there. So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah. We have a very specific place we want to start. I'll let Tarah.
Yeah, well, and I also want to invite you to just say whatever else you may want to say about yourself that feels relevant at this time. But in addition to that, first of all, your website is just so beautiful. Just the feeling of it when I go there, it's very calm, and it just, it's very, and I love the first thing that you see is that Jennie is the story tailor, which I love so much. Because we always talk about the stories we're telling now, right? This on here in the Source Connection. And then the after that, it says our bodies express the stories we tell ourselves. Is your story a good fit? And I'd love for you just to expound on that in whatever way you'd like to.
Yeah, it's something that, over the years of treating people, and I'm a British trained osteopath, and we're very hands-on manual medicine. We don't prescribe. We don't do more of the allopathic stuff. And, it just sort of developed over time that I was like, it's so much more about what I talk about with the patient and the stories that come up through that medium of touch that really are the essence of what's going on for the person, and that treatment is normally targeted at the what rather than the why. And osteopathic sort of philosophy is all about getting to root cause and really sort of understanding where these expressions are coming from in the body. And one of the things I always say to people, which sometimes makes them go, whoop, is I said, there's never anything wrong with the body. And often they're coming to me with some sort of, pain, or it's like something wrong. It's like, there's never anything wrong with the body. In fact, it's an arrogance of us to assume that because we are in discomfort, that there is something wrong. The body is always healing. And people say, when will it get better? When will I start? I'm like, it's now, if you're breathing, you're healing, right? And although there may be discomfort going on, that's the body trying to calibrate. It's trying to come back into balance. So trying to just address that expression, that symptomology, is really sort of missing the point. And of course, there are times when we do need to, turn that flame down and help people manage it so they can get a grasp of what's going on. But really, it's what's underneath it and what's the story underneath it. And I normally say, there's there can be about 7 whys underneath there, and even if someone comes in, oh, I've hurt my knee, oh, what happened? Well, I tripped and fell and bumped it. I'm like, okay, so why did you trip? Well, I was feeling a bit kind of foggy that day. I wasn't really watching where I was going. Why were you foggy? Well, I hadn't really been sleeping that well. Why aren't you sleeping? And back until we really get to the crux of what's going on. So that's the story, right? And I love the phrase that, our biography becomes our biology, and that it may be a localized story like that, that's something that's going on in the sort of, present context, or it may be an emotional pattern, a behavioral pattern that was set up very, very early in childhood, that has manifested in this expression through the body at later in life. So that's the part. It's kind of like the detective story. That's the bit I love to get to. It's really sort of to dive under all the layers. And whilst we can sit and talk about that, when I first work with somebody, we take a sort of history and have a deep chat about what's going on. Really, it's once we get hands-on, that starts to open up, and the things that they didn't even think were relevant. Again, the body is so intelligent. It's beyond whatever we can perceive as. I always talk about the difference between intellect and intelligence. Intellect is how we often just override things and make sort of arbitrary decisions about, oh, well, no, this is about this. But the body speaks the truth always. And so when I start to involve touch and get into the hands-on part of the process, a whole layer of information can come up, and I start to get intuitive hits about, oh, what did this ever happen to you? Or tell me about this. And people are like, where did that come from? And it's like, that's the subliminal conversation that goes on. And often I feel like I'm the interpreter or the translator of those deeper stories that sometimes people just haven't been able to contextualize or aren't hearing. And I sometimes get the sense that when I get hands on, the body goes, oh, thank goodness somebody's listening. Could you tell her I've been yelling, but she's really not getting it? So I just kind of interpret the signals, and I just love that conversation, and always bringing humor to it. Yes. I'm like, your body's kind of saying this. Don't know whether that means something to you. They're like, okay, So it's just the mystery of the this existence that we're in, and just trying to decode it and have fun with that. And that's what we're here to do. We're not here to just be perfect beings with everything's going right. We don't learn anything from that. So to really sort of roll up our sleeves and get into it and have fun with it is turns people's relationship around, and just say, you just have to stop and ask. And I really encourage people, to start to have conversations with the body. And it may feel a little bit like you've got some kind of multiple personality thing going on, but it's that sort of sense of, like at the end of each day, I have a little check-in with my body, and I just go, okay, guys, who didn't I listen to? Who needs to yell? Just create that forum, that line of communication for, not necessarily for the body to speak, but for you to be able to tune in to those deeper messages. And at first, you often just get crickets and you think, this is kind of weird, I'm just kind of lying here. But if you just keep allowing for that space, you'll start to get these, intuitive hits, and this information coming through, this deeper intelligence coming through that we haven't been taught to connect with, and I really feel this is something that we should be encouraged to do from childhood. We tend to shut it down with this sort of, oh no, well, that's just silly, But so keeping that fun frequency, because it's all about vibration and frequency. So when you're in that frequency of fun, I'm like, hey guys, let's have a conversation. And that in itself allows for those messages to come through.
Yeah.
So that's really sort of where I've gone with this idea of the story, because a lot of the time people are living, an existence that they feel is accepted in some way. You know, they're trying to please, to be accepted, to not be shunned from the tribe, and often suppressing aspects of themselves that they don't feel are accepted and would cause them to be, you know, not one of the gang. And that's a sort of a fundamental need, that we need to be in connection. And if we feel we have something going on that threatens that, we'll suppress it. But if you're not in truth, that will manifest as symptoms at some point in your life, because the body needs you to be in your true frequency. So helping people to just kind of dissolve some of the layers and look at what, you know, even the word personality, right, comes from persona. That's actually comes from the Greek, although it's kind of Latin terminology, from the Greek idea of wearing the mask, right? The Greek theatre mask. Persona means per, through, sona, sound, how you pass sound through the mask. So actually that very word personality is about the mask that we wear to become accepted in the world, but it's not really necessarily your authentic truth. In fact, the first book I wrote was called The Authentic Performer, Wearing a Mask and the Effect on Health, which everyone thought I wrote during 2020, you know. That was about 10 years ago I wrote that. But yeah, so it is that idea that we're wearing a mask of acceptance a lot of the time. But if that's not congruent with our true expression, then the biology will be in conflict in some way and will manifest itself. So unless you get to those stories, the symptoms will keep sort of running through your life. They might be louder at some times and quieter at other times, but, you know, it's still there. So that little frequency, that little incoherence is just running through your system all the time. So that's really how I sort of arrived at that kind of languaging around it.
Yeah. And I just wanted to let everybody know that the mask book is predictive programming. So I'm kidding.
Yes, it was.
In the good way, right? Because I mean, the subtitle is Wearing a Mask and the Effects on Your Health. Yeah. I mean, if you think about that, right? Yeah. Just even like metaphorically, like not even physically, and just all of that. I have a question about, how did you get into that? Coming from the performance world and looking at the body, right? And then going into osteopathy and just all of that. How was that all in alignment for you?
Yeah, I really felt like, even as a child, I've always felt like I've been a bit of a sort of research scientist on this planet, you know. I always just felt a bit like, so what's this? I'm not.
We talk about that here all the time.
Right.
We're like,
what's this again? I don't really know. Was I supposed to be here? Oh my!
Was I supposed to be here? Wait, guys, was I dropped off at the wrong place?
Yeah,
We sure, guys? Are we sure about this? Okay. Yeah.
So I was always had this just slight disconnect, and I think that's possibly a safety mechanism in childhood as well. But I came from a family of performers. My dad was a TV director at the BBC in England, and my mum was a dancer. She'd been a Royal Ballet trained dancer, and she had, by the time I was born, she had her own dance studio. So I was 14 months old when I did my first ballet class, because she plonked me at the side whenever the moment I was up on my feet, I was joining in. So that was just normal to me. So I would be in the dance studio most of the week, and at weekends we'd often go up to the BBC with my dad, and I'd be in TV studios watching, you know, he did a lot of the sort of comedy and light entertainment shows, all the big classic comedies, Monty Python, Fawlty Towers, you know, all these kind of things. So again, that explains a little bit probably about my weirdness.
Love it.
So, but I always used to find, like, even in those TV studios where I'd just be, you know, I'd just sit at the side doing, you know, the schoolwork or whatever, whilst all this rehearsals were going on. And often I was around quite well-known people of the day, but I would see them, you know, in their natural habitat as research scientists, as opposed to the public persona, again, that other people would see. And like, oh, that person's so wonderful. Oh, wow, you get to meet them. And I'm like, yeah, I have a different picture over this side of the, or that some artists, even if they were, lovely people, were just terrified, absolutely terrified in the studio and just so nervous. And I'm thinking, why do you have to be so nervous don't you enjoy what you do? So I used to sit there and observe all of this and just be like, and seeing the discrepancies. And of course, being around a lot of performers, are wearing a mask for their living, right? That's part of the job as an actor, whatever, to play a role. But I think that a lot of artists are drawn to that profession because they spent their childhood playing a role because who they were wasn't really accepted. And so therefore they got very good at it. And therefore, well, it was a natural progression to sort of go into the arts. And so one of the things I experienced that myself, I was painfully shy as a child. If somebody came and spoke to me, I'd just be like horrified, like, oh, no, don't put focus on me, but yet put me on a stage in front of 1,000 people, no problem, perfectly at home. So I had my own experience of that. So as I, and I was a child performer as well. I did my first film acting job when I was like 5. And then at 8, I started touring with a ballet company. I had a child role and I toured for 5 years. So I was in and out of school. I was at a full-time theatre school anyway and touring. So I was just around, adult professionals all the time. So I, got to know the psyche very well of the performing artist. And so then as a dancer, I was a ballet dancer for years and then did musical theatre and was a singer and had a lot of injuries and things that you get as a performer. But it was very difficult to find people to go to for treatment who really understood what you did for a living. They're like, oh, well, you need to rest. It's like, no, I have 8 shows a week. And if I'm not on stage, I don't get paid. So you need to help me get. And so I decided, I just had a bit of a knack for sort of massage and stuff. And so every show I did, I used to sort of become the unofficial company masseur. And people would say, I'll give you a bottle of wine if you do my shoulders. So I started doing these, and then people were like, oh, you should train in this, So I ended up training as a sports massage therapist when I was still working in theatre. So I would treat people in the day and then do my show at night. But I could really get to the root of what they were doing, because again, talking about root cause, dancers' injuries, musicians' injuries are normally coming from something in their technique or in the particular repertoire they're doing at the time. So if you don't go back and address that, they're just going to repeat the behavior that caused the problem. So I was able to really, pick apart technique and things and clean out those things that were sort of leading them down the injury path. And then, with anything in the sort of healthcare realm, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. And actually, the more terrified you are of what you don't know. You're like, I don't know whether I should tell you, I don't know enough. So I would always be referring people on to osteopaths when there were things that were going beyond my realm. And as artists, a lot of artists are very drawn to osteopaths because they have a very global approach to treatment rather than being very sort of, well, it's just your knee, so we only look at your knee. We look at the whole system. So at a certain point in my career, I was transitioning out of theatre work and I was singing with a band, and so I had days free. And so, because osteopathy is a 5-year degree program and it doesn't really fit with an 8-show week in theatre, so I decided to train as an osteopath, but was still performing all the time with the band that I was with. It's a big band, 20-piece swing band. So wow. Singing that. So I developed, into osteopathy, and then as I was working in London at a specialist performing arts medicine clinic. So we have performing arts medicine, which is kind of like sports medicine, but for performing artists. And I was working at that clinic, and so treating primarily artists. And I realized that the people that came in, artists are often always playing a role. They come in and say, I'm an actor. And I'm like, yes, you are.
so accurate.
Surgery. Yes. Well, I have this shoulder thing that's going on, and I'm like, why are you performing for me? I and what I found was that the people who were kind of more at that end of the spectrum were slower to heal. They were less connected to the body and to the truth underneath it. And it was only when we started to, and sometimes 3/4 of the treatment time, I was just talking to them, just getting under the layers. And when we really got down to, well, what, who are you really? Then the system started to shift. So I wanted to understand the biology of that. So I started to go sort of into deep research into sort of neuroscience and even looking at the neuroscience of creativity and what is it that makes someone creative that often predisposes these particular behavioral patterns and the sort of addictions and volatility that artists are often painted with. Oh, you're so dramatic, you're so emotional, you're so, up and down. But there is actually a biological basis for it and an anatomical basis for it. So when you describe that to an artist, it's like, this sense, you get me. So you just described me, because they themselves often feel like they're just, riding the waves of all this, kind of crazy ups and downs. But when you understand that there are actual fundamental structural differences in brain anatomy that go with the creative kind of temperament, it's just that sort of relief. And it's like, well, now I understand it, and I know I'm not just crazy. How do I then manage it? And so now you've got sort of a structure underneath that helps you to go, oh, well, that's okay. And that, if you don't have these ups and downs of the creative temperament, you don't have creativity, right? It's a polarized thing. And the more tension between the two poles, the more motion, motion comes from tension, right?
Yeah.
And that kind of led me over the years into more, I'm now down to the quantum level and sort of quantum physics and unified physics, and getting down to, because I was always very intuitive as a practitioner, but I was very sort of rigorously trained, and I was in sort of deep academia for a while. I helped develop a master's degree in arts and medicine. And I was lecturing in the division of surgery at University College London, which is one of the top medical schools in Europe, feeling like a complete fraud, just go, hello, dogs, really? Okay, I'll teach anatomy to surgeons today, fine. But made it a performance, and they all were like, oh my God, I've never been to a lecture like this before. It's like, if in doubt, I'll just do a song and dance number if I'm so I was always in this gap between reconciling the physical from the metaphysical, the intuitive from the evidence base, and like, am I justified in even using these techniques if I can't explain it in rigorous terms? And what I found as I started to get into quantum physics and into unified physics, which is this idea that we have, the classical Newtonian world and the quantum, nature's not that, doesn't draw lines in the sun like that. It's using the wrong language, right? So studying unified physics, which is able to describe everything from the quantum level to the cosmological, and all the scales in between. Suddenly I had a language that could describe what people will put in the bucket of energy medicine or, metaphysical kind of components of the therapeutic process and the tangible. And so I developed last year a course in sort of quantum biology and the language of that for practitioners to help them understand that they, they're not stepping between, oh, well, if I'm hands-on, I know I'm on a muscle, a tendon, a ligament, I know what I'm doing, and then the energy stuff's just woo-woo. It's like, no, it's all the same. And there is a common language that can describe all of this and therefore give you sort of give validity to those things that are so powerful and often more powerful than the more traditional techniques, so that we can broaden that toolkit and give ourselves permission to use everything within that toolkit, and not sort of see them as these segregated things, and help the people you're working with understand that, and to trust those intuitive things, and that they can be explained in sort of physical terms. And the body is not really biology, it's physics. When you start looking at it, and on that level, it's all energy, frequency, vibration. Right?
Yeah. So again, you're translating again, right?
Yes.
Just from that, just very solid, and I'm air quoting here, to then what is this thing?
Yeah.
And then just how do we put this into words? So maybe people who are a little bit more brain oriented can go, okay, I get it, right? Some people don't need that.
Yes, some people don't need it.
Yeah.
I would say, when you're working with people, you can't just have one language.
Exactly.
Expect it's a one size fits all. And so when you've got all these different ways in, and when you use your intuition, when somebody comes in the door for the first time for a treatment, I'm already like, where are you energetically? What language is going to hear better? What's my entry point? And, so some people I'm very kind of, nuts and bolts, and it's all very kind of, tangible. And then others, we can go straight to that softer place, the more energetic place, and then come into, then describe, well, actually, there's a tangible thing going on here. So you have to have this elasticity to be able to accommodate everyone, to get, the best results for everyone, and to speak the language of whoever's in front of you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm curious, Jennie, what your experience is with, you said it at the beginning, something about you find kind of the same kind of whys over and over for people, right? For performers, like the root causes. So would you share some of those? Like what are, of course, everybody's unique. Everybody's so different. It's never going to be cookie cutter. Just interested in kind of a general overall, like for performers, what is there like when you get down to the nitty gritty?
Yeah, so I think, one of the core things that are under so many of the layers is identity. And again, this sense of who am I truly, and particularly performers who are highly skilled, highly successful often, and perhaps were from childhood. I used to teach at the Colburn School in downtown, which is sort of like the Juilliard of the West Coast, elite level music conservatory. And you're getting, these incredibly talented classical musicians who, were training from the age of 3, went to live with their teachers. And so often their identity is completely wrapped around their ability to play their instrument, to dance to the degree that they do, or sing, whatever their modality is. And if you take away and say, right, I tell you tomorrow you're no longer able to play your cello or your violin, or whatever.
Yes.
Who are you? There's just like, there's nothing under there, because their entire focus. And there's also this often a huge weight of expectation on a talented youngster, that, the parents have made these incredible sacrifices to send their child to work with this teacher, and all the other members of the family just had to hang around whilst they were doing their lessons and be in the taxi service taking them to all their things. So a lot of the focus of the family has been put on this child. And so you go from, in the world of psychology, because that was something else I did after being a osteopath for many years. I realized I was working so much with the psychology. I did a master's in psychology. And, it's the difference between what we call intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. So intrinsic motivation is that joy of just doing something because it's creative and it feels good and it's fun. And I would often say to musicians, do you remember the first time you picked up an instrument? What was that like for you? And often it was like a recorder or something, As a kid, you just pick this thing up and you're blowing into it. It's like, I can blow into this thing and make noise, and it's like, I don't care whether it's in tune or whether it's nice for people to listen to. And often it isn't, and it's just the fact that you're able to do that and the joy of that, or that you put on music and you start flinging yourself around your living room. And again, you're not worried about technique or any of these things. So you come into it with that intrinsic motivation. And then suddenly all these parameters get stuck on you. And like, oh, well, it's got to be this way. What's a socially acceptable sound to make versus just making sound for the fun of it? And all these kind of rules and regulations come in. And then this sort of, unfortunately, in a lot of the arts training, there's a lot of the sort of whiplash approach, fear-based approach to training that literally kind of rips the joy out of you, and you start to become extrinsically motivated by, what does my teacher think? Did I pass that exam? Did I win that trophy? Did I get that job? So it's all about things that are beyond your control, and you lose touch with that inner joy that goes with it. And often then if there's expectation from parents, it's like, well, I need to please my parents, or I sever the bond, right, that is, and it's all about safety. The body, at a very fundamental level, is either running the safe program or the unsafe program. And what often gets skewed in that process is that safety is often conflated with familiarity. So even if you're in an abusive relationship, if you've got a teacher who just yells at you and it's familiar, it's getting you reward because people go, oh, you're really good at what you do. Well, I have to get beaten up by my teacher, metaphorically, hopefully, not physically, to get that outcome. Therefore, that must be the right thing. So therefore, that's good, right? And so then not only do you tend to seek out those things because they're familiar, it's this idea of abusive relationships. Why do people tend to sort of keep falling into that pattern when it's clearly unsafe? It's familiar. And so the biology that normally draws you towards safety and gives you chemical rewards for being around safety brings you chemical reward for being around something that's familiar as well. So we end up with artists who are not only sort of used to this kind of abusive drive towards perfection, they do it themselves. They don't actually need someone outside themselves. They'll beat themselves up. They'll be in a practice room for 8 hours with their violin, beating themselves up psychologically, because that's how they think you get the job done, right? So underneath all that, when you're in that constant state of contention, then you are in a sympathetic drive, the fight or flight drive of the body. One of the components of that is increased inflammation, right? So inflammation is a defense response. Again, there's nothing wrong with inflammation. I always say inflammation is information. Why? So if you perceive you are under attack or under threat, the body doesn't discriminate between a saber-toothed tiger and your mind monkeys going, you're not good enough, you're not good enough, you got that audition, oh my God. We produce inflammation as a preemptive strike against an attack where we might get an open wound, right? If you're going to get mauled by a bear, there might be an open wound. Inflammation is there to heal, right? It's what we produce to get red hot around a wound site. So we produce inflammation as a kind of like, just in case we need to mop up an open wound, but the wound is not appearing externally. So what's happening to that inflammation? It's running unchecked through the system. So if you're overusing your muscles or something through excess practice in this sympathetic state with inflammation in the system, you're more likely to produce an injury. So even people say, well, I've just torn a muscle in my shoulder or pulled a muscle in my shoulder. It's like, yeah, but what was the emotional context that allowed for that to happen? So if you're playing with an abusive mentality towards yourself, you're more likely to develop an injury. So that's how we start to see how those stories manifest into the physical expression. And then if you look at people, again, a lot of artists were not allowed to be themselves. They had to be the virtuoso performer or the whatever it was. if you are in a place of resentment, which can be the end result of that, I'm not allowed to be, that is an internalization of inflammation, and that's where the self is attacking self, and that can be the basis for autoimmune conditions. So there are quite a high prevalence of autoimmune expression in the artistic population. So it's again some of these skewed emotional boundaries that are underlying that, and that we've been entrained to beat ourselves up. So that is the very definition of an autoimmune expression.
Wow. I have a question about, that's one like experience for an artist. Then we have the artist whose parents told them, what do you think you're going to do with that? Who do you think you're going to be, right? And how does that manifest? And I'm speaking for myself. Like, how do you think you're going to do that? I mean, come on, get your head straight and go do something that actually is, worthy.
Yes.
And how does that translate with the people that you see? And what is that core, just, it's so interesting to hear you talk about, because oftentimes as artists, we have this idea that those people made it, right? Oh my God, look, they made it. It's glorious. It looks glorious. And we don't know what the price is for that, or the struggles that may come with that kind of expectation, those kind of like intense energies being poured into you. And like, you need to give back. It's not just unconditional in that way. Maybe for some of them it is, but so yeah, how does that translate in your observation with people who are just kind of like muted, like, yeah, okay, well, you can't really do that. And then it just becomes like that little side thing that they do, but there's not enough confidence to just be like, no, it is, right? So it just kind of gets put to the side, and then the wounding and just, also the muting of that and how it comes out in different ways in the bodies.
Yeah, that is so, so powerful. That suppression. Again, it's a suppression of truth, a suppression of self. And, I'll often, I don't just treat artists. So sometimes I'll be working with people and, they've got sort of, wrist pain, and I just go and I feel this, like their forearms feel like they're about to burst. I'm like, do you paint? Do you make jewelry? Do you what? It's like these arms are screaming to express. And it's trapped energy. So wherever you've got trapped, unexpressed energy, then what should be expressed outwardly is being turned inwardly, and that can be, as a result of that sort of suppression of creativity. And also there's often when you've not been allowed to be that, or it's not even that you're not allowed to it, it's almost like you end up with shame attached to it, because being the artist, well, that's not like an acceptable profession. So I feel that when I'm doing that, there becomes an element of shame attached to it. And shame, it's been shown in studies that the expression of shame produces something called IL-6, interleukin-6, which is an inflammatory chemical in the body. So again, these emotions that we express are not just, they are biochemical experiences that are having some sort of manifestation in the body. So yeah, that repression of expression often results in these sort of this trapped sensation in the body. I very much work with the fascia, and the fascia is so expressive of our emotional state. The person can tell me any story they like. Put my hands on their fascia,
you're like
tell in the system here. Because the fascia is like body armor, right? And so if we're in this defensive mode, fascia is the most beautiful structural substance. It's crystalline, but it can be anything from liquid gel-like consistency to really tough that it's almost as tough as bone. And it's not like a muscle or something that's elastic that has contractile capabilities. It's not, people say my fascia is tight. It's like, no, that's not. I like accuracy in terminology, because when we don't understand these processes, that's when we're not working with the system. So fascia changes its consistency under vibration. And so if you are loading a particular area of your body, there's a lot of vibration going through it, that it will thicken and toughen itself up. So like the plantar fascia, which is on the sole of your foot, is quite tough because it takes a lot of vibrational load, right?
Yeah.
So it's supposed to be. There's not a problem with that. But when, and there's many layers of fascia in the body, but the way I describe it in simple terms to people, it's a bit like you've got this sort of unitard under your skin. And when it's in that sort of defense mode and it's armoring, it's like it's a size too small. And people always go, oh, that's just what it feels like. It's like I'm shrink wrapped, under my skin. And I can't. So that to me is always what are you not expressing? What are you armoring? What are you defending? And so often, again, as you start to work, and I use vibrational techniques to start to change the consistency of the fascia, and often then the story comes out. You can sit and have a conversation with them there, and they're like, no, I'm not sure. Open up the fascia and the story comes out. So this idea that we hold all our thoughts and emotions and things in the head, like there's this box that contains style cards, all these
crazy
things. Not what's going on. So the body speaks, right? So again, that story is held in the body, and often when I go to a particular spot and start to change the frequency there, the whole story comes up. Oh, like, as a kid, this thing happened. It's like, there we go. But that's that's what fascinates me about, and that's why you can tell me any story you like, but your body's going to tell me the truth,
the real story.
Let's put that on the table and start acknowledging that, and often that can be very confronting for people, so you have to be careful how you
address
it. But sometimes all I'm doing is just starting that little line of communication, and then you go and play with that, and it's an exciting thing to do.
Our bodies are so amazing. It reminds me of, I used to practice acupuncture for a long time, an acupuncture practice, but it's that same thing. After I would, we talk before, and then you go in and you do the treatment, right? It's all energetic. It's all just moving the chi or the energy or whatever needs to be done. And then afterwards, people are they're like almost completely different. It's just such an opening, such an invitation. Not every time, because some people resist that, but it's, and when you were talking about, Jennie, all of these sort of whys and sort of the underneath of these performers, it really can be the case for any of us in our lives, all of the things that you said. It really does apply to everything, to everyone. And to me, that if we boil that down even more, because I always use the word, I love when you said detective, because I always told that to my patients or client. I was like, okay, I'm just the detective, and we're going to do some detective work. And that kind of lightened it a little bit for them too. Like, oh, okay, sure. You can ask me questions. But it always boiled down to this one thing, which I'm not saying it's the case all the time, but is not good enough. Not good enough. It's just the default of every human, not that we come in that way, right? But the conditioning that we get is just boom, not good enough. And so it always manifests in some different way. But
it's that kind of Darwinian approach of survival of the fittest. That's that not good enough, right? That we have to fight, scratch, and tear our way to get anywhere. And if you're not doing that, well, you're lazy. So it's very much a societal conditioning that is so destructive, and it goes completely against the nature of creativity. And like you say, we're talking, we've been talking here about artists, but everybody is a creative being. Everybody is playing a role to a certain extent. I used to do treatments in a law firm in London, and there are people there who would come down to my room in the basement of the law firm, just be like, oh, I want to be an interior designer. But my parents said that I had to be a lawyer. They were all lawyers, and that, so they're playing, they're wearing the mask of being a lawyer. And so we're all doing it, but it is this kind of, this absolute web we've built over, millennia, really, I guess, of this sort of, it's so crazy when I look at it now, this whole construct we have about how we're supposed to progress and achieve in life is so destructive in so many ways. But I think it's changing. I think we're here to the change, right? It may not be happening in our lifetimes, but we are the bridge here, because we've reached the point where that just
doesn't
work. Yeah, we've reached the end point of how far we can push that, and our biology will not let that stand.
Yes.
Nature will not let that stand.
Yes.
So we are starting to find these new ways and new languages for things, and permission to just be in truth. And if everybody was just in truth, I've never, over the years I've been treating people, this language of anxiety, I didn't know what that meant as a child, and now I'm getting 9-year-olds brought to me who said, I suffer from anxiety. I'm like, what are we doing? And I think there's many layers to where that's coming from, but it's just exhausting. What are we doing? So I feel like we are at this turning point, and I think a lot of us came here to be here at this time to help with this shift, and to just be a little bit ahead of the game, and this ability I've always had to kind of just step back and view everything from a quite objective perspective, just look down at it like a chessboard and go, why are people doing this and why are they doing it? I was, when I talk about these whys, the wisdom of whys, the whys, I was the kid that drove my parents mad by going, why? Yeah, but why? Yeah, but why? Just because, So that's what stands you in good stead. Question. Yes. And if it doesn't make any sense, don't do it.
Don't do it.
It's like, that's just stupid. And that's again when I love using humor, when people have got, I don't know, some sort of ritualistic behavior that they're stuck in, or an addictive pattern. It's just, when we pick it up, it's just silly. Go Monty Python on it. You with a fish and go, well, that's just stupid. Why are you doing that? So, and then I go, I don't know. I don't want. Should we try something else? So that relief of just like, I can just laugh at it and let it go. Get over yourself. It's like we're all here to mess up. We're not here. It's like when I teach, I still teach ballet sometimes, and I was a professor at Chapman University for a while teaching ballet, and I'd get all the freshmen coming in and in this completely hyper perfectionist state, trying to, prove themselves to me. I'm like, if you're perfect, I don't have a job.
Yeah, I don't need to be here.
I need to earn a living, so could you please not be perfect so I can help you? And that there is no perfect. There's no when I'm teaching people, sort of pre-professional level, either as musicians or as dancers, I'm not here to teach you to be perfect. I'm here to teach you how to dig yourself out of a hole. Because you're on stage, you're going to mess up. It's just doing 8 shows a week, you're going to mess up.
Sure.
What you need, the skill you need to learn is how to dig yourself out of a hole. And people that have a linear trajectory to success, who've never encountered failure, they have no tools to deal with it. They have no tools to deal with adversity. We're here to learn how to deal with adversity, not to be perfect. So when you change the goalposts like that, it's like, so now when something adverse happens, it's an opportunity to figure it out. You never learn to figure anything out if everything's always perfect. So things that go wrong, or when you slip up, if I'm working with people with addictions or things like that, I messed up, and I'm like, great, well, that was an opportunity to be a field experiment. Okay, what were all the steps that led to actually going and reaching for that thing that you were trying not to reach for? And I like people not to focus on, I'm trying to give up the cigarettes or the whatever. It's like, what were you using that thing to suppress? What's wanting to come out that was helping you to keep that focus on that? And then this just becomes irrelevant in the process. So again, it's just shifting people out of these patterns of behavior that they've been indoctrinated into, I'm just going, that's just stupid. Let's do something else, you know.
Why is it easier for some people than others? Why is it easier for some people to move through their stories, right? Why are some a little bit more stuck in that story, or stories that were told, or that they lived through the traumas? Or how do you see that? Why are some people just more fluid and just a little bit more like, oh, okay, well, yeah, that's done. Like and some people just need more tending and more support through that.
Yeah, well, it comes down again to this safe versus unsafe. Is your body running the safe program? Or is it running the unsafe program? And a lot of people, again, it's this conflation of safety and familiarity, you know, and I see this a lot, and particularly with performers, actually, you know, where people have either an injury or some sort of, you know, physiological process that's causing symptoms that they actually don't want to get rid of, but they're actually, you know, they're saying, oh, I just want, you know, I'm getting rid of it. It's, at some level, it's serving them. And so with artists, sometimes, oh, I've got this shoulder thing, and you know, it's been going on for months, and it's just not going. I've tried everything, blah blah blah. And often, the longer you've been away from practicing your craft and away from the profession because you haven't been able to play or dance or whatever it is that you do, the fear of going back and not being good enough again. Injury serves a purpose to give you a reason to fail, right? Oh, well, I can't go for that audition because this isn't better yet. I'm not ready. So it becomes an excuse to fail that keeps you safe because you don't want to put yourself out there to be rejected. And they go, oh, you're not good enough. Oh, we had somebody else while you were off with your injury who was better than you. Sorry, you've no longer got your job. So there's that going on, but on a broader level, that happens with people, even with things like autoimmune, or, you know, and I don't like to, you know, I don't want this to sound like it's like blame language. Oh, get over yourself. And, you know, yes, people are having these manifestations, but often they become so defined by a diagnosis. And it's one of the things that I just, you know, I really try not to, you know, what have I got? You know, label for it. And, you know, I'm not going to tell you because then you're going to become it. Oh, I've got this, and that attracts attention, right? Attracts sympathy.
Yes.
So a lot of people are being comforted by the fact that they've got something that requires sympathy. And I'm not saying that they're consciously necessarily doing that, but it becomes a thing. And I've seen it a lot with people that, you know, support groups are great. I don't want to say that they're not, but sometimes it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Oh, well, I'm in my support group for my whatever exhibition. And then you're all validating each other's behavior rather than wanting to look for a path out. You're finding comfort in the fact that I'm being seen and heard. People get me, which is great. But you can have that without the condition as well. So it's just sort of what is making someone feel safe. And sometimes having their diagnosis makes them feel safe. And when you start to say you don't have that anymore, who are you? Well, now you don't have an excuse not to go out and do the things that you say, oh, I've always wanted to do that. Have you really? I really want to climb that mountain. Right, off you go. You're good to go. You know, so it's again, am I safe? Am I unsafe? So a lot of what I do is boiling down to helping people's nervous systems auto-regulate. So again, it's a childhood thing. We come into this world as an imprintable being, and we are our nervous system sort of parameters, if you like. It's the elasticity of it. Is dictated by the environment, right? It's like genetics versus epigenetics, right? It's not the entity, it's the environment within which it's cultured. You know, we talk about culture medium in a petri dish, right? It's the same as we are in the broader cultural medium, and so if you are brought up in a household where there's a volatility, then your nervous system doesn't learn to auto-regulate because there's volatility and and even if that, I don't mean necessarily like in an abusive way, but you just got a highly anxious mother or something who's not auto-regulated herself.
Yes.
And you as a child, you have to, because we are, as human infants, we are completely helpless, right? If we're left alone, we don't survive. We are completely dependent on a caregiver for our survival. We're not like some of these little Bambis and things that come out. They're good to go. So therefore, we have to protect the bond with the primary caregiver, whoever that may be, for our safety, again, right? For our survival. So if you've got a very hyper anxious parent, then it becomes your job to keep quiet, to if I scream because I need something, I'll get yelled at or I'll get left alone, so therefore I will repress my needs to protect their mood. Therefore I protect the bond, and you therefore sort of believe, you have to believe as an infant that your caregiver can do no wrong, otherwise that threatens your survival. If they're a complete mess, then I'm I've had it, right? So we therefore can see no wrong in them, even if there is wrong happening. It's familiar, right? So therefore our bonding chemicals, which are dopamine, serotonin, all these things that help us bond with a caregiver, get bonded to something that's volatile. Therefore, we see volatile as safe. We'll go and seek out volatility in our life because we perceive that as safe because it's familiar. So it's kind of, so a lot of the time we're having to go back to that and figure out where did this come from and how can we relearn. We can still, nothing's set in stone, but we have to kind of figure out where where it got skewed so that we can learn to auto-regulate the system, later in life. It's a bit like people that have sort of dyskinetic disorders, sort of movement disorders and things. Often they missed out crawling. It's like you go back and do crawl therapy to put back in that neurological stage of development that was missing. So it's just that, it's just like, let's find a way for you to regulate your system that's not dependent on you seeking out things that are no longer useful to you, and to not blame it. So there's no blame. You were just trying to stay safe. So because there's also shame when you believe a parent can do no wrong, and then things are volatile, you have to believe it's you because they can't do wrong, so it must be you. That brings shame. Then we're into the inflammatory mess that shame brings, and so then there's shame attached to everything go through. So that's kind of the often the ladder that I'm looking at, of even just, somebody that can't sleep or has anxiety or something. Often it's getting back to those stories from childhood and letting go. There's no blame to parents, that they were just programmed the way they were programmed.
That's right.
People say, is this inherited? Well, it's often the behavior that's inherited rather than actually a genetic disposition to these things.
Wow. I said it was going to be a healing broadcast, and no one noticed, but my eyes have been,
You've been
increasing in what it's a very hydrating conversation. Let's put it that way.
Yes, it has been. Jennie, I would love to know, as we kind of wrap up here, what is your most favorite part of what you do or how you do it, and what lights you up the most about it?
I think what lights me up is actually not knowing. It's like, ooh, a new person. I wonder where this is going to go. What approach is going to work best for them? That figuring out, and even just from an email that somebody sends me wanting to book in, and they just get, and it helps me to train my sort of intuitive side, which I've been developing more and more. To the point now where I just get their email and I'm already dining. Oh, I can feel there's this in the system and that in the system. And then this sort of non-local entanglement thing, which in physics I can now describe, although I used to call it intuition, whatever. Now I can describe it in actual terms of physics, that I can pick up on those frequencies. And then when I meet them, I'm like, ooh, was I right? Was I wrong? Was I off? But just that excitement and just helping people to catalyze some excitement for their healing journey, rather than, we tend to approach everything with like this doom and gloom. It's pain, and I'm never going to. Like, well, you're never going to get. The universe. The way physics works is that the universe is just reflecting back to you what you're putting out. So if you go, I've always had this back pain, I've always had it, well, then you'll always have it, right? Because that's
right.
The universe, it doesn't judge, it's just reflecting back. Whereas if you can, helping people to catalyze this excitement of, what would it feel like not to have that? Can you feel that in your body? Yeah, I can. It's like, well, then you're healed. You can dial it up. You're already, it's not like, will it take 6 weeks? It's like, if you can imagine, you put imagination in this other bucket that it's not physical, it's like, but you're feeling it in your body. So if you can do a daily meditation of what it just feels like to feel fabulous in every cell of your body, well,
that's it.
What's the problem? You're already healed. And yes, you may collapse back into old patterns, but then we just need to find out, well, what are the breadcrumbs that lead on that path to get to that pattern, and let's just not do those. So again, it's just simplifying, making it fun, and just seeing the shift where people go, I can do this. And I always say to people, I'm not doing anything. You've healed me. You've healed. I'm not healing you. I'm tuning you up. I'm helping you attune to different frequencies. I'm showing you the options. You're doing it. It's absolute arrogance. If I could possibly do anything to you, you're doing it.
Yes.
So putting that sort of, it's me. So that's what I enjoy about it, and the fact that I never do the same thing twice in a day, So it keeps, because I get bored very easily. So
I can relate to that.
Oh my goodness, where can people find you? Let them know.
Yeah, I got off social like about 3 years ago, and very much enjoying not doing that. So it's really just my website, which is jenniemorton.com, JennieMorton. And I've got a newsletter there, which I hardly ever do, but if I've got events and things, I will do a little blast out, so you can sign up to that if you want to know where I am and what I'm doing. And I've got some sort of online learning there, a few little free things, and an anxiety course. And then a few books. But really website's the main way to get me.
And we're going to extend an invite whenever you want to come back and talk about the 3 books you're writing. And maybe by that time you've written one or whatever, we would love to have you here. Yeah. I know about them, but I think people would really enjoy listening to you talk about them. And thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
It was so fun. And it's just so fun having you.
It was fun being here. Yes. With my weird morning lighting in this place.
It's great.
Angelic.
Yeah. Thank you,
everyone. Yeah. See you soon.